One major global policy group is now saying U.S. inflation will hit 4.2% this year, much higher than what they were saying before the war, certainly higher than what the Fed's been saying. And Doug Flynn joins us now, co-founder of Flynn Capital Management. And we've had conversation after conversation about whether it's that projection or the Fed's target rate of 2% inflation. And I know you think that that's kind of arbitrary, that we don't need to necessarily get down to 2. But I would also assume that you're not that comfortable over 4, are you?
Definitely not. But,
Yeah.
you know, the interesting thing about this organization that put that 4.2% inflation rate out for 2026 expectation is they also put out a 2027 inflation expectation of 1.7%. So I think they're saying there may be a spike here in inflation, and I don't think anybody's sort of discounting that. But they're also saying that the long-term aspect is still okay here in the U.S. even with that, and then we're going to get below 2%, and that's probably even lower than what the Fed is targeting for 2027 at this point.
In case anybody starts accusing us or me of being glass half empty on all this stuff in terms of economic impact, I have on my telestrator a couple of things. This is half empty with Brent crude, which is the global benchmark for crude oil, getting back above $100 today. But this is the other part. When we talk about gas prices at the pump, they're going up and up and up. But here you go, Doug. Look at this. Today. Right? The first price drop since the conflict in the Middle East, and it was huge. 0.002 cents. So here we go.
You got to start somewhere. And I think this is the beginning of what turns from sort of an international war story to a American consumer kitchen table inflation story, cost of living story. And it begins with gas prices. And then the inputs of that are not just there. It shows up in transportation, deliveries, the surcharges. Then it impacts food because of that. And also just overall inflation expectations. And so that's the fear. Right. We talked about duration 100 times. The longer this lasts, the more that becomes a problem and the more people feel it. And that's what they're trying to avoid before it gets too far along.
Well, the argument at the White House, which is true in the sense that we have pumped more oil, and this idea of being energy independent helps in a situation like this, I would argue, because it could be worse, right? But the idea that what happens over there doesn't matter at all here, or that we don't need the Strait of Hormuz, seems to be obviously not true, because we see what happens on the price side, whatever's happening on the actual supply side. But here's the Treasury Secretary on ships. The president says that was the gift that we received apparently from Iran, now starting to pass through the Strait. But here's what Besson added to that.
We are starting to see more and more movement in and out of the Gulf today, and this is more than yesterday, and this is the beginning. I am confident that shipping traffic will continue to increase on a daily basis, even before we secure the straits.
If investors were confident, wouldn't the oil futures be down rather than up today, which they were yesterday when people actually, some were hoping for that?
Yes, I think today had more to do with Trump saying that they better get serious or else, and that 5-day timeline's getting closer than this. They could both be true at the same time. And I think what he's really referring to here is once Lloyd's of London sort of vacated the insurance on these carriers, the U.S. version or the international version they're trying to put together here to ensure all of this and put that back is just beginning. They talked about it weeks ago, but it takes time to do these things. And so that's going to start happening. It actually hasn't even happened yet. But when that happens, that should start make this even more, and more ships should be able to pass. And I think it's got to be a full court press. It's not any one thing that they're doing. They have to attack it from all fronts, and this is just one of many. And so the theory is then that would increase it and then theoretically lower the prices along.
But to go back to this conversation we keep having about duration, what the thing that really pushes out duration, from an economic perspective at least, as far as I see it, is if Trump does go through with, say, a seizure of Karg Island, or attacking or seizing some of these other islands, you have to anticipate what the Iranian response, such as they can respond, will be. And we know last time when the Israelis hit those natural gas fields, we know what they did. They hit in Qatar, they hit that LNG factory. So that's different, because it takes years to get some of these plants, like an LNG facility, back online, right? If you hit it with a missile or with a drone, as opposed to just reopening a strait.
The more damage that's done, the harder it is to come back, and so that can take a really long time. And you could expect further setbacks. I mean, the market's down a bit today. We're getting closer again to that 10% correction point. We all would have expected to go down even more, and perhaps it will if those things happen, and then we'll bounce off of that, and as everybody's expecting, get this behind us. It's just a matter of how soon do we do that.
Thank you, Doug. As always, closing bell there.